What does it mean to give? When we think of generosity, we often imagine great gifts, bags of gold, houses donated to charity, or vast resources offered to support the poor. We tend to believe that the value of a gift is measured by its size, by how much money is spent, or by how many people are impressed. But in the Buddhist tradition, the story is very different. Generosity is not measured by numbers, wealth, or size. It is measured by the heart. Buddhism begins with something very simple yet profound: the idea that what truly matters in life is the quality of the mind behind each action. The Buddha again and again reminded people that what shapes karma is not the material weight of a deed, but the intention that gives birth to it. This is especially true in the case of giving. A rich man may donate an entire palace with pride in his heart, and yet the merit he gains may be small compared to a poor woman offering only a handful of rice with absolute sincerity and love. In other words, the gift of the heart outweighs the gift of the hand. In the world of the Buddha, giving was part of everyday life. Monks walked each morning with their bowls, receiving food from villagers who came out of their homes with rice, fruit, or whatever little they had. For the lay community, this act was not just about supporting the monks' physical needs. It was also a way of cultivating their own spiritual practice, training the heart to let go of attachment and to open with compassion. Among the many stories passed down through centuries, there is one tale that continues to touch people deeply. It is the story of a poor woman, so poor that she had nothing to give except a small portion of her daily meal. Yet, when she offered this to the Buddha, he accepted it with the same dignity and respect as he would a king's treasure. And more than that, he declared her offering greater than many lavish gifts made with pride. Why did he say this? Why would a simple handful of rice, given by a woman who had almost nothing, be considered more powerful than all the gold and jewels in the world? The answer lies in the teaching of intention. The woman gave with a pure heart. She did not give to be praised, nor to gain recognition, nor to gain power or honor. She gave because she wished, from the depths of her being, to share what she had with one she revered. She gave without clinging, without calculation, and without expecting anything in return. And in doing so, she revealed the essence of true generosity. This story is not only about the past. It carries a message that is alive even today. In a world where value is often measured by price tags, and where generosity is sometimes displayed for social recognition, we need to remember the simple truth. What matters most is not what we give, but how we give it. A poor woman in ancient India, through her act of pure giving, left behind a lesson that still speaks to us across centuries and cultures. It reminds us that everyone has the ability to give, no matter how little they own. It teaches that the greatest gift is the gift of the heart, a gift that comes from love, sincerity, and freedom from selfishness. As we begin to reflect on her story, let us open ourselves to a new way of seeing generosity. Instead of measuring it in terms of money, let us measure it in terms of purity. Instead of comparing how much one person gives against another, let us recognize the invisible quality of intention. The story of the poor woman is a reminder that in the eyes of wisdom, the smallest act of true kindness shines brighter than the grandest act of pride. And it invites us to ask ourselves, what do we give in our lives, and how do we give it? To truly understand the power of the poor woman's offering, we need to step back and imagine the world in which she lived. India at the time of the Buddha was a land full of contrasts. On one side were wealthy kings and merchants who lived in palaces, wore jewelry of gold, and enjoyed banquets every day. On the other side were peasants, workers, and beggars who struggled simply to find enough food to survive. The social system was divided into classes, with the rich often believing that their gifts were worth more simply because they came from wealth. Into this world came the Buddha, teaching that the value of an action did not depend on birth, rank, or possessions, but on the intention behind it. Every morning, the monks and the Buddha himself would walk through villages and towns carrying their alms bowls. They did not cook for themselves, for their way of life depended on the generosity of the community. In return, the people were given the chance to practice generosity and humility. For the rich, this was an opportunity to display their wealth and support the teachings in a public way. They might offer large amounts of food, new robes, or even donate land for monasteries. The entire town might gather to watch such offerings, and the names of the donors would be remembered for years. These acts were good, but they were not always free of pride. Sometimes people gave not from a place of love, but from a desire to be praised or remembered. The poor woman in our story lived on the opposite end of this spectrum. She had no riches to her name. She worked long hours just to earn a small portion of rice to feed herself. Her hut was simple, her clothing plain, and her daily life a struggle to survive. Yet within her burned a deep respect for the Buddha. She had heard his words about compassion and wisdom, and they had touched her heart. When she learned that the Buddha would pass through her town, she felt a strong wish to offer something, no matter how small, to honor him. It is not hard to imagine her thoughts as she looked around her house. She had nothing, no gold, no fine cloth, no treasures. Even the food she had was only enough for her own meal, and yet she could not let go of the desire to give. Finally, with quiet determination, she took a handful of rice, her own food for the day, and placed it in a small bundle. It was all she had, and she would go hungry after giving it. Still, she felt joy rising in her heart. For her, the chance to offer even this small portion to the Buddha was worth more than her own comfort. When the day arrived, the streets were filled with people. Wealthy men and women lined up with trays of food, baskets of fruit, and pots of sweet dishes. Servants carried gifts of clothing and fragrant oils. The air was alive with the noise of drums and chatter, and everyone wanted to be seen offering something. In the midst of this crowd stood the poor woman, holding her tiny bundle of rice. To others, it looked pitiful compared to the rich displays around her. Some might have laughed. Others might have whispered that her gift was so small it was meaningless. But in her heart, she stood with complete devotion, waiting for the moment to place her humble offering into the Buddha's bowl. This contrast is what makes the story so powerful. On one side were the wealthy, giving much, but sometimes with pride. On the other side was a woman who gave little in quantity, but everything in spirit. Her handful of rice, compared to mountains of gold, would seem to have no weight at all. But in the eyes of the Buddha, the truth was different. He saw not the size of the offering, but the purity of the heart that gave it. By setting the stage in this way, we begin to see why the Buddha's recognition of her gift was so revolutionary. It turned the common way of thinking upside down. No longer was generosity a matter of wealth or class. No longer could people claim that only the rich could make meaningful offerings. This woman, with nothing to her name, stood as proof that the greatness of giving is found in the mind and the heart, not in the material object. Her story, set against the backdrop of a world obsessed with riches and status, becomes a light for us today. It tells us that true value does not lie in what society praises, but in what wisdom sees. And it prepares us to hear the next part of the tale, how the Buddha received her gift and turned her act of devotion into a teaching that still inspires the world. The morning sun rose gently over the town, casting a golden glow across the rooftops as people began to gather. In the streets, the news had spread quickly that the Buddha was coming, and everyone wanted to be there. For the wealthy, this was an opportunity to show their devotion through grand offerings. And their servants moved quickly, carrying trays of fragrant rice, sweet cakes, fruit, oils, and new robes. Some came with carts filled with goods, hoping to secure a place of honor in front of the Blessed One. The air was full of excitement, the smell of food mixing with the sound of drums and voices as the people waited eagerly. Among them, almost unnoticed, stood the poor woman. Her clothes were worn and simple, her body thin from years of hard labor. In her hands, she held a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside it was her gift, no more than a handful of rice, the very portion she had saved from her own meal. To anyone watching, it was nothing compared to the piles of offerings surrounding her. Yet her heart was calm and steady. She knew it was all she had, but she also knew it came from the deepest sincerity of her being. The procession of monks appeared in the distance, their saffron robes glowing in the sunlight. At their head walked the Buddha, serene and dignified, his presence radiating peace. The crowd grew silent as he approached, and one by one people stepped forward to place their offerings into the bowls of the monks. Laughter, whispers, and chatter filled the air as the wealthy displayed their gifts, proud of the abundance they could give. Each wanted the Buddha's attention. Each wanted to be remembered for their generosity. The poor woman waited quietly. Her heart beat faster as the Buddha drew nearer. Doubts rose in her mind for a moment. Would her gift seem too small? Would people laugh at her? She felt the weight of her poverty in the eyes of the crowd, but she also felt the fire of her devotion. She reminded herself that she was not giving to please others. She was giving from love and respect, from the wish to share what little she had. As the Buddha stepped in front of her, she bowed low, her hands trembling as she held out the small bundle of rice. The Buddha paused, looking at her with gentle eyes. In that moment, the crowd also paused, curious to see what would happen. Many expected him to pass by quickly, for what was a handful of rice compared to the treasures he had just received? But instead, the Buddha extended his hands and accepted her gift with the same dignity, the same calm respect, as if it were the greatest treasure of all. He placed the rice in his bowl, and then turned to the woman with words of blessing. His voice was steady and warm, and he declared that her offering, though small in the eyes of the world, was vast in the eyes of truth because it came from a pure heart. A wave of silence passed through the crowd. Those who had mocked her fell quiet, and those who had pitied her now looked with awe. The Buddha's acceptance had turned her humble gift into something greater than all the riches around them. He explained that giving with pride or expectation was like planting seeds in dry soil. They might sprout, but would soon wither. Giving with sincerity and faith, however, was like planting seeds in fertile earth. They would grow into strong trees, bearing fruit for years to come. The poor woman, though she had little, had given with the greatest of intentions. The woman felt tears well in her eyes, not from shame, but from joy. She had expected nothing, yet in return she received the Buddha's blessing and the knowledge that her gift was seen, not by its size, but by its heart. She walked away lighter, though she had given away her own food for the day. Inside, she felt full, not of rice, but of happiness and peace. For the first time in her life, she felt that her poverty did not define her worth. Her true wealth was in her ability to give, and that was something no one could take away. The crowd slowly began to understand the lesson. The kings and merchants who had brought carts of treasure felt a stir of humility. They realized that their gifts, though great in material value, were small compared to the woman's because their hearts had been clouded with pride. Some bowed deeply, recognizing their mistake. Others felt challenged, for they had never thought that a poor woman could outshine them in generosity. Yet the truth was clear before them. The Buddha had shown that intention was the measure of all giving, and in that measure, she stood higher than all. This moment became one of the many unforgettable stories passed down through time. People told and retold it, not to glorify poverty, but to remind themselves that the path of kindness and generosity is open to all, regardless of wealth or position. A handful of rice, given with love, became greater than mountains of gold. And the poor woman, who once might have been overlooked and forgotten by history, was instead remembered for her act of pure devotion. In the eyes of the Buddha, every gift matters when it is given with sincerity. By receiving her humble offering with respect, he taught not only her, but the entire community, that the value of giving lies beyond appearances. It lies in the invisible world of intention, in the silent language of the heart. And through his words, her simple act became a teaching for all ages, reminding humanity that greatness is not found in wealth, but in the courage to give selflessly, even when one has little. When we look closely at the story of the poor woman and her offering, it is clear that the Buddha was not only receiving food. He was teaching a lesson that speaks across time and culture, reminding us of what truly matters. The lesson begins with a simple truth. The value of a gift is not in the gift itself, but in the heart that gives it. This is the foundation of generosity, and it is why the Buddha honored her small handful of rice as something greater than all the treasures of kings. Generosity has always been a central practice in the path of awakening. It is not just about giving away objects or wealth. It is about training the heart to let go of selfishness and to open itself to kindness. In daily life, we often cling tightly to what we have, fearing that if we give something away, we will have less. Yet in reality, giving creates abundance in another way. It nourishes not just the one who receives, but also the one who gives. When the poor woman gave her food, she might have gone hungry for a day, but her heart became full. Her act of giving released her from fear and attachment, and that joy was far greater than the comfort of one meal. The Buddha taught that intention is the seed behind every action. If the seed is pure, the fruit will be pure. If the seed is clouded with greed or pride, the fruit will be bitter, no matter how grand the action appears. This is why the woman's small gift shone brighter than the large donations of the rich. The rich may have given more in quantity, but many of them gave with pride, expecting recognition and honor. Their gifts were mixed with self-interest. The woman, however, gave without expectation. She gave simply because her heart was moved by devotion. That purity of intention turned her act into something vast, even though the material object was small. This truth is not limited to the time of the Buddha. It applies to every moment of our lives. Think of a child offering a flower to a parent, or a friend offering a kind word in a moment of sorrow. These acts cost almost nothing, yet they can heal hearts and change lives. On the other hand, someone might give a large sum of money but do so reluctantly, or with the desire to be praised. Such giving does not carry the same light. The story of the poor woman shows us that the power of generosity is invisible to the eye. It cannot be weighed on scales, and it cannot be measured in coins. It can only be felt in the heart. There is another teaching hidden in this story, and that is the lesson of equality. In the society of ancient India, the poor, especially women, were often ignored or dismissed. They were seen as having little worth compared to the rich and powerful. But the Buddha's acceptance of her gift overturned that idea. By honoring her offering, he showed that spiritual value does not depend on wealth, class, or gender. He revealed that the path of goodness is open to all. A poor woman, invisible in the eyes of society, became an example for kings and nobles to follow. This was a radical message, one that lifted the hearts of the humble and challenged the pride of the wealthy. The story also reveals something important about the nature of giving itself. True generosity is not about the object, it is about the act of letting go. When the woman gave her rice, she let go of her own comfort for the sake of devotion. She let go of fear that she might not have enough. In that letting go, she tasted freedom, even if only for a moment. This is why generosity is often called the beginning of wisdom. It is a small step toward the realization that clinging brings suffering, and letting go brings peace. Every act of giving, no matter how small, becomes a practice of freedom. We might also notice the difference between giving with pride and giving with humility. Prideful giving creates distance. It says, "I am the giver, you are the receiver, and I am above you." Humble giving, like the woman's, erases that distance. It recognizes the shared humanity of both giver and receiver. When the Buddha accepted her rice, he did not treat it as something less. He received it with equal respect, showing that the gift and the giver were worthy. In doing so, he reminded everyone that the spirit of generosity is not about superiority, but about connection. The lesson goes even deeper when we think about our own lives today. We live in a world where generosity is often displayed on screens, where donations are announced with fanfare, and where gifts are sometimes given to build an image rather than to serve a need. The story of the poor woman cuts through all of this. It brings us back to the core, the heart that gives. In the quiet of her devotion, without audience or recognition, she performed an act that became immortal. This tells us that no gift is ever too small if it is given with love. In daily practice, generosity does not have to be dramatic. It can be as simple as sharing a meal, listening with patience, offering a smile, or helping someone in need. These small acts, when done with sincerity, carry immense weight. They shape the heart, soften the ego, and build compassion. This is why the Buddha held up the woman's act as an example. He wanted people to see that true wealth is not measured in gold or possessions, but in the ability to open one's heart and give freely. When we reflect on the story, we can see that it teaches us three essential things. First, the measure of a gift is in the intention, not in the size. Second, generosity is a path open to everyone, no matter how poor or powerless they may seem. Third, every act of giving is also an act of letting go, a step toward freedom from attachment. These lessons are timeless, and they invite us to look at our own lives with new eyes. The poor woman may have believed she had nothing, but through her act of giving, she discovered she had everything that truly mattered, a heart capable of love, sincerity, and courage. The Buddha's words turned her small gift into a great teaching, one that continues to echo through the centuries. And for us today, it is a reminder that each moment offers a chance to give, not from the fullness of our pockets, but from the fullness of our hearts. The Buddha's recognition of the poor woman's gift was not only a moment of kindness, it was a deep, philosophical teaching. It challenged the common way of seeing value and replaced it with a vision rooted in wisdom. To understand this, we must reflect on why he praised her small offering so highly. The answer is not only about generosity, but about the very nature of human life and the way we measure meaning. In the eyes of the world, value is often tied to wealth, power, or the size of an act. A palace built for the community seems greater than a bowl of rice given to a monk. But the Buddha turned this measure upside down. He showed that the spiritual worth of an act is not found in its size, but in the intention and the transformation it creates in the heart. The poor woman, by giving all she had, embodied the essence of freedom from attachment. In that moment, she was richer in spirit than the kings who surrounded her. This reversal reveals a central truth of the Buddha's teaching. Greatness is not measured by external possessions, but by the inner quality of the mind. Her act also illustrates the idea that the law of cause and effect applies equally to all beings. In society, people are not equal in wealth, status, or power, but in the realm of karma. All are equal in their ability to shape their future through intention and action. The woman, though marginalized in her community, was able to plant seeds of immense spiritual growth simply because her heart was pure. This breaks the illusion that only the rich or powerful can make meaningful contributions. It opens the path of goodness to everyone, no matter how little they own. There is another layer of reflection here. When we give from the heart, we are not just transferring an object from one hand to another. We are transforming ourselves. The woman may have lost her portion of food for that day, but she gained something far greater, a heart unburdened by fear and filled with joy. This is the paradox of generosity. The less we cling to what we have, the freer we become. The act of giving loosens the chains of attachment that bind us to suffering. This is why generosity is not just an external act, but also an inner liberation. Each time we give, with sincerity, we step a little closer to freedom. When we compare this with modern life, the lesson becomes even clearer. Today, large acts of charity often make headlines, while small, quiet acts go unnoticed. But the Buddha reminds us that what is unseen may in fact be greater. A billionaire who donates money while seeking publicity may be giving less in spiritual value than a child who shares their only toy with a friend out of love. The scale of generosity cannot be measured by money alone. It is measured in the depth of selflessness. This challenges us to reconsider how we define wealth. Perhaps true wealth is not in how much we own, but in how much we are able to give without fear. The woman's act also invites us to reflect on the nature of courage. It is not easy to give when one has almost nothing. The instinct of survival tells us to hold tightly to whatever we have, to protect it at all costs. Yet she did the opposite. She gave what little she had, knowing it meant sacrifice. In that moment, she displayed a courage greater than that of soldiers on the battlefield. She faced not an enemy outside, but the enemy within, the fear of not having enough. By overcoming this fear, she achieved a victory that wealth alone could never bring. Her story is also a mirror for our own attachments. Each of us clings to something: our possessions, our status, our opinions, our sense of self. Letting go even a small part of this clinging feels difficult. But the poor woman's gift shows that letting go is possible and that the act of letting go is itself a gift. It is a gift to others because it brings them joy or relief, and it is a gift to ourselves because it frees us from the prison of attachment. When the Buddha honored her offering, he was not only praising her, but also teaching everyone present that the path to liberation begins with small acts of release. Finally, we can reflect on how her story speaks to the universal search for meaning. People often chase after achievements, wealth, or recognition, believing that these will give life purpose. But meaning is not always found in grand gestures. Sometimes it is found in the quiet strength of a single act done with love. The poor woman did not change the world in a visible way. She did not build temples or feed thousands. Yet her act of giving touched the heart of the Buddha, inspired the community, and continues to inspire countless people today. This shows us that true meaning lies not in the scale of our actions, but in their sincerity. In the end, the story of the poor woman is not only about generosity, but about the very way we live. It teaches that freedom, courage, and meaning are not found in wealth or status, but in the heart that dares to give. Her handful of rice became a timeless teaching because it revealed a truth that the world often forgets, that the greatest treasures are not those we keep, but those we give away. The story of the poor woman and her handful of rice is not just an ancient tale to admire from afar. It carries lessons that are alive and practical for our daily lives today. We may not be living in villages with wandering monks, but the heart of the story speaks directly to the struggles, fears, and hopes we all share. It asks us how we see value, how we measure wealth, and how we choose to live with others in a world full of inequality and desire. One of the first lessons we can take is the idea that generosity is not measured by size. In modern society, people often feel they cannot give unless they have a lot to offer. Someone might say, "I am too poor to help," or "What difference can a small act make?" But the story shows us that even the smallest act, if done with sincerity, can carry immense weight. A kind word, a smile to someone who feels invisible, a meal shared with a hungry neighbor, or even a moment of attention to someone in pain. All of these are gifts of the heart. When we stop comparing what we give to the wealth of others, we discover that we already have the power to bring joy and relief into the lives of those around us. Another lesson is about letting go of fear. In our fast-moving world, many of us live with anxiety about the future. We hold tightly to money, possessions, and even relationships, afraid that without them we will not survive. Yet this tight grip often creates more suffering than the actual loss itself. The woman in the story faced the same fear. She had nothing, yet she gave what little she had. Her courage shows us that letting go, even a little, can free us from the prison of fear. We do not need to give away everything, but we can practice loosening our grip. Maybe we choose to donate a small amount, even when we feel insecure about our finances. Maybe we choose to share our time, even when we feel busy. These small acts break the power of fear and strengthen the spirit of trust. The story also teaches us that true wealth lies in the quality of the heart. In today's culture, success is often measured by how much money we make, the house we own, or the recognition we receive. Yet many people who have plenty still feel empty inside. The poor woman, with nothing but a handful of rice, displayed a richness that cannot be bought. Her act of giving made her wealth greater than the kings around her. This challenges us to rethink what it means to be rich. If we measure wealth by the depth of kindness, then every person has the chance to be rich. The question is not how much do I own, but how much can I give without fear? There is also a lesson about equality. The woman was poor and unseen by society. Many would have dismissed her as unimportant. But when the Buddha appraised her gift, he lifted her above kings and nobles. This shows us that every person, no matter how low their position, carries dignity and the ability to contribute. In our daily lives, this reminds us to see beyond status. The cleaner in the office, the street vendor, the child begging on the roadside, all of them have hearts as capable of greatness as the richest and most powerful. To honor people not for their possessions, but for their humanity is to walk in the spirit of the Buddhist teaching. Another lesson we can take is the power of intention. Many of our actions in daily life are automatic, driven by habit or desire. But the Buddha taught that it is intention that shapes karma, not simply the act itself. The poor woman's offering was small, but her intention was pure, and that made it powerful. For us, this means that when we act with sincerity, even if our effort seems minor, it can carry deep impact. A hurried donation given without thought may not carry the same weight as a small, thoughtful gesture done with full attention. So in our daily lives, we can ask ourselves, am I acting out of habit or out of love and care? This reflection can turn even small acts into steps of real transformation. The story also points us toward the practice of joy in giving. In many cultures today, giving is seen as a loss, a subtraction from what we own. But the woman's story reminds us that true giving multiplies joy. She gave and found freedom. The Buddha received her gift and shared wisdom. The community watching learned a lesson they would never forget. One small act spread joy far beyond what she imagined. When we give with joy, we do not feel poorer, we feel richer. This is a practical truth anyone can test. The next time we give, we can pause to notice the happiness that rises in our own heart. This happiness is proof that generosity is not just for others, it is also nourishment for ourselves. Finally, her story teaches us that greatness often appears in humble forms. In the modern world, we are trained to look for inspiration in celebrities, leaders, or those with influence. Yet the poor woman had none of these, and still, her act shines brighter than many great names in history. This is a powerful reminder that ordinary people doing small, sincere acts are the true keepers of wisdom. We do not need to wait until we are rich or powerful to live meaningfully. We can begin now with whatever we have, wherever we are. In this way, the story of the poor woman is timeless. It whispers to us across the centuries that generosity, courage, and freedom are not distant ideals, but daily choices. When we choose to give without fear, when we honor the value of each person, when we measure wealth by the quality of our heart rather than the size of our possessions, then we are walking the same path she walked. Her handful of rice becomes our handful of kindness, ready to nourish the world today. The story of the poor woman and her handful of rice is more than a tale from long ago. It is a mirror in which we can see ourselves, our fears, our hopes, and our potential for greatness. At first glance, it may seem simple. A woman gives, the Buddha praises her, and the community learns a lesson. But when we look deeper, we find that this story holds truths that can guide the way we live, even in our modern world filled with wealth, competition, and endless desire. The woman's act reminds us that generosity is not about the size of the gift, but the depth of the heart. In a society that measures worth by numbers, achievements, and possessions, this teaching shines like a light. It tells us that even the smallest act of kindness, done with full sincerity, has the power to change lives. We may never know how far the ripples of our actions reach. A single kind word, a moment of attention, a little help given when someone is in need. These can be more valuable than mountains of gold given without care. The Buddha's response shows us another truth, that the dignity of every person is not determined by wealth or status. In the world's eyes, the woman was invisible, someone who owned almost nothing. Yet in the Buddha's eyes, she was rich in spirit. By honoring her act, he lifted her above kings and nobles, teaching everyone present that true greatness lies in the mind free from attachment. This challenges us today to look beyond appearances, to respect and value every person we meet, no matter how poor or forgotten they may seem. Her courage is another lesson. To give when one has plenty is easy, but to give when one has almost nothing requires a heart of strength. She showed that the real enemy is not poverty, but fear, the fear of not having enough. By letting go of her only food, she defeated this fear and found a joy greater than hunger could take away. In our daily lives, we may not face the same situation, but we do face our own fears. Fear of loss, fear of change, fear of not being secure. Her story teaches us that by loosening our grip and daring to give, we discover a freedom that no amount of wealth can buy. When we reflect on her story, we see that it is not only about giving to others, but also about transforming ourselves. Each act of generosity weakens the chains of selfishness that bind us. Each act of letting go brings us closer to a life of peace. The poor woman gave rice to the Buddha, but what she truly offered was the gift of a free heart. And this is something we all can practice, no matter who we are or where we live. In the end, the story of the handful of rice is not only about the past, but about the present. It invites us to ask, what am I holding on to too tightly? What can I give today, even if it seems small? How can I live in a way that values the heart over possessions? These questions are not only spiritual, but deeply practical. They shape the way we treat our families, our communities, and even ourselves. The poor woman did not leave behind monuments or kingdoms, but her story has outlived them all. Her simple act continues to echo across centuries, reminding us that true greatness lies not in what we keep, but in what we give. Her handful of rice became a timeless teaching, showing that the smallest act of kindness, when done with love, can become a treasure that never fades. So as we close this story, let us carry its lesson with us. Let us remember that generosity is always within our reach, that courage is found in letting go, and that the value of life is measured not by what we own, but by the love we share. The woman with her handful of rice has already shown the way. The question now is, will we have the courage to follow it?